Hey guys, thank you for joining me again. Do you know what? I'm just going to get this spinny sort of thing out of my system now, and then hopefully I can sit normally and speak to you. That would be nice, instead of twizzling now and again. So today what I was going to do is I was going to tell you a bit more about myself and what my history with Crohn's. And the best way I thought to do that was one of the times when I was in hospital due to complications. I was in Scotland with my dad, and he had to come through to Glasgow to come and sit with me, basically, because I had gone to see family through in Glasgow and ended up in hospital. Regular occurrence for me, always end up in hospital. So my dad and I decided to sit and write a story based on my life. So I do have my laptop with me, so I'll be sat at a sort of angle. It is quite sad. I've read it to people before and they've started crying. I'm very sorry. I apologise now, but I would probably have some tissues with you. Okay, well, if we're sitting comfortably, I will begin. Okay, Chapter 1, Room 101. Well, here I am again. A medium-sized dirty window overlooking a car park, 4 small square blue walls, a small television, a large yellow face clock, a bathroom, a bed, chairs and a drip stand. So much for the 4-star hotel I was supposed to be staying in. Welcome to the 60s built red brick building in Greenock, known as the Inverclyde Royal Hospital. Not actually room 101, but room H10, level H north to be exact. Somebody clearly cannot count, as they've associated the levels with letters instead of numbers. How did I get here? Now that is a story. At the age of 7 years old, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. Bearing in mind this was 19 years ago and it wasn't all well known then. Not that has dramatically changed. There is still little more information about it now. Yeah, that's right. 1 in 10 people are diagnosed with Crohn's. It's more commonly found in families, but as far as I'm aware, I'm the only one, so far, to have developed this illness. 3 weeks ago, I was working my shift at Spire Murrayfield Hospital. I worked as a healthcare assistant clinical support worker. On that particular day, had been experiencing a lot of sharp abdominal pains. Abdominal is tummy, in case you didn't know. Situated more on the left side behind my stoma. Oh yeah, forgot to mention that, although my whole life seems to revolve around it. We will get into stomas at some point, but for now we are focusing on Crohn's. But that is something, and I will introduce you to my little co-host Casper at some point too, which will be fun. But yeah, back to the story. When driving home, the pain seemed to increase and I decided to take myself into A&E at Victoria in Kirkcaldy. After waiting in the waiting area for around 20 minutes, my name was called and I was ushered through to the examination area. A very plain area filled with little green curtained booths surrounding a nurse's station. A nurse asked me to sit down and proceeded to go through my details. Something that they do a lot in hospitals just to ensure that you don't forget who you are or why you're there. After having my blood pressure, pulse, temperature and respiratory rate documented, I was told to sit tight and wait for a doctor. Now, considering that it is a hospital and being sat in A&E department, it is important to remember that doctors work to their own timescale and just happen to show up when it's convenient for them. After a little while of waiting, I was seen by a young female doctor and proceeded to tell her my history. She informed me that I would need to have some bloods taken, another task that I am all too familiar with. The pain that I was experiencing was sharp, stabbing pain that would sometimes reduce me to tears as I would be doubled over. Each episode would last for a couple of minutes but could continue for as long as half an hour. Oh yes. Back in January 2011, I had also suffered similar symptoms. Unfortunately, this would lead to a very dramatic life-changing incident. For some months leading up to the Christmas period, I had developed a nagging pain in my lower abdomen. At this point, I had already been diagnosed with Crohn's for 8 years. Since being diagnosed at a young age, even the doctors that specialise in gastroenterology, that's the study of the stomach and intestines, were struggling to identify and treat the cause of the disease. Crohn's disease is an autoimmune illness where your immune system attacks itself whilst thinking there's foreign bodies in your digestive tract. Crohn's can be apparent in the whole digestive system, ranging from the mouth all the way to the anus, that's in the bottom. It is more common in small and large bowel, so that's your small intestine and your large intestine, also known as the small intestine and the colon. But it has been known to spread to other areas. It can strike at any age, but is more prevalent in adolescence through middle age. Although it is a very young disease, modern science has developed multiple treatments. But like any medical treatment, some may not be relevant to certain individuals. The main symptoms of Crohn's disease are inflammation of the gut lining, sores and ulceration. So ulcers are like spots, just a bit bigger, which left untreated can lead to perforation or rupture. One of the big issues with Crohn's is malnutrition through lack of nutrient absorption in the bowel. So for the last 8 years I found eating very difficult due to constant need to be near a bathroom and associating eating with being in pain. At my lowest weight of around the age of 16, I was 28 kilos. That's just above 4 stone. My BMI, body mass index, wasn't even on the scale. Over the early years, I was prescribed various drugs in an attempt to control the disease. These range from sulfasalazine, azathioprine, methotrexate, infliximab, and other various steroids and immunosuppressants. These are all things that I'll go over when we talk about medication. They're very, very difficult to pronounce, and I find quite amusing sometimes. Due to my lack of weight, I found that these medications did not make much of a difference. As my mum would regularly say to me, if you don't put any fuel in a car, how do you expect it to run? School was was a very difficult time for me, especially in the later years, as my daily routine involved travelling 12.5 miles twice a day to end up heading straight to the toilet. I would spend a lot of my journey consoling myself, treating my stomach as if it was a little upset child. I would often find myself rubbing my stomach and telling myself it wouldn't be much longer before we'd arrive. I ended up knowing that journey like the back of my hand, and I would pick out certain landmarks and from there be able to estimate how long it was likely to take before reaching either end, either at school or home. Being so young and dependent on my surroundings made it very difficult to socialise. I was luckier in my earlier years because in the small village that I live in, I live at one end and the shops are at the other. Luckily, my grandmother used to live halfway, which was also situated across from the play park where I go with my friends. This would make it a bit easier if I needed to use the toilet urgently. General adolescent activities like going bowling, cinema, restaurants and long car journeys were practically impossible. So, the day in question, when my life dramatically changed, was the 24th of January 2011. This particular day was a Monday and I'd woken up and put on my school uniform ready for the long bus travel. On reaching the school, I felt extremely unwell, like I was going to faint. I knew that it was important for me to find someone that I knew. I remember walking into the maths building to find a teaching assistant who I'd worked with for a number of years and knew all about my medical history. I managed to find her in the Year 11 common room. She looked at me and immediately knew something was wrong. I remember sitting in her office on a large blue spongy chair drinking water and feeling my head drop backwards as I tried with great difficulty to stay awake. The deputy head teacher of the school was called into the room to see me. He took one look at me and said they needed to transfer me to hospital. At this point, I had been sent home from school on numerous occasions due to pain and fatigue or tiredness. I begged for him not to phone the ambulance and I insisted that I was well enough to go to my lessons. Fortunately, the deputy head disagreed and my mother was called to pick me up as they couldn't send me to hospital without her supervision. I remember feeling so weak that I had to be wheeled across the courtyard in a wheelchair to the main building where the sick room was situated. Not long after, my mum arrived. The deputy head spoke to her and suggested that I be taken to hospital. I do not remember much after this point. Unknown to me, I was being blue lighted. On regaining consciousness, my eyes beginning to focus, I was surrounded by bright white lights and lots of clinical noises, such as machines beeping, metal clanging, nurses and doctors running around. But I appeared to be laying flat on my back, staring at the ceiling. Not long after, my mother was by my side. Her eyes were red and tear-stained, but I could not understand why, nor did I have the energy to ask. I remember telling her that I wanted to go to sleep, but she told me that I had to stay awake and stay with her. I do not know how long I was waiting for, but after a little while I was surrounded by medical staff and being examined. I was focusing on my mum, who had moved to the right hand corner of the A&E department. Although I wasn't panicking, knowing that she was there gave me a sense of relief. She was talking to a member of the medical team, but I have no idea what was being discussed. I remember a male member of staff standing by my head, and he was talking to me, but I had no idea what he was saying, as I was focusing on trying to read the expression on my mum's face. I don't remember being in pain, but I remember the feeling of not having the energy to care what happened to me. I was oblivious to how sick I was becoming, and no one seemed to know what was going on. I remember the man at my head telling me that I needed to be cannulated, a little tube commonly inserted into the back of the hand or arm by a removable needle to gain access to a vein, another procedure that I would soon become more familiar with. Unfortunately, after several failed attempts of cannulating my arms and hands, they told me that the next best bet was my jugular vein in the right hand side of my neck. I still have like a tiny little, I call it an upside down smiley face, because that's exactly what it looks like. It's a little scar. Yes, the male member of staff gave me a little bit of local anaesthetic to numb the area and proceeded to wait for the numbing to take effect. He took a sharp object and pressed it into the numbed area, and he asked me if I could feel it. By this point, the local anaesthetic hadn't taken full effect, but I said it has, so I feared that time was not on my side. He managed to cannulate my neck with ease, and the next thing I knew, everyone bar 2 medics had left the bay, and I was being helped out of my clothes and into hospital gown. What seemed like a couple of minutes later, the bay was full of medics once again. I remember my mum walking at the right side of me for a little while, but I have no recollection of an anaesthetic room or anything else for that matter. So that is what I can recall from the day where I had my life-changing surgery. I was later on told that I'd been kept in a medically induced coma for 2 days. I remember waking up and my mum, my sister and my dad being there, but not a lot else. I remember having a mask on my face to give me oxygen, and I remember my mum saying to me, "Do you know where you are?" And I remember shaking my head, and she went, "You're in a hospital, you've had a really big operation." It wasn't until later on where I really sort of became conscious of what was going on around me, that I realised how unwell I had been. I was told that the surgeon who did the surgery spoke to my mum and said that they had done everything that they could and it was up to me now. It had been a 10.5-hour operation, and that if I hadn't have been in A&E that day, or been taken in that day, I would not have woken up the next morning. I am incredibly lucky to be here, and every day I remind myself of that. And it's so difficult not to take life for granted. It really is, because it's such an amazing thing to have. Yeah, you may not be having the best of times right now, but it does get better. I'm sorry if that story upset anyone. To me, I got over it. I'm here now. Excuse me. I'm here now. I'm thriving. I'm a lot healthier than what I was. And what happened did save my life. It really did. I would not be here if I hadn't been there that day. Like, my kidneys failed, and that's the first thing that goes. I'm very, very lucky. I'm very, very thankful. Yes, life does have its up and downs, but when we talk about mental health, we'll go more into depth on that one. But for now, I just wanted to share my story. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask. See you next time.